Right. Hi, everybody. My name is Chelsea Cohen. I'll be moderating this session. I hail from Laney College, one of the Peralta colleges, and we're so glad to have you here today. Before we begin, I just want to go over a few things. The session's being recorded, so if you don't want to be seen in the recording, you can turn your camera off. Feel free to mute your microphone unless you are invited to speak. If you have questions, use the chat at any time and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. The closed caption feature is enabled so you can activate it by clicking Show Captions or CC Live Transcript in the bottom toolbar. Um, and with that, I would love to introduce our presenter, Arrow Hill from Dartmouth College. The title of the session is Gender Euphoria in Terrifying Times, Lessons in Supporting and Sustaining Students and Ourselves. Over to you, Arrow.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea. And good morning, as I said, good afternoon, good evening for wherever you might be. I'm so excited to be presenting once more at the Peralta Equity Conference. Thank you so much for having me. And yay, good morning, good morning. As folks are trickling in, I know that the welcome was still kind of going on when I popped from that Zoom room into this one. So we'll give it another second. I'm going to put a little prompt in the chat just so we can get to know a little bit about the folks that are in this room with us. So I will do that now. So your name, pronouns if you use them and want to share, where you were zooming from and or your institution, and something that you're excited about learning today. And feel free to either unmute, raise your hand, or put it in the chat. Whatever is fine. I'm also about to share my screen, so don't be jump scared. Amazing. Can I just get a thumbs up if y'all can see it? Beautiful. Thank you, Chelsea. See some stuff in the chat. Amazing. Yay. Welcome, Kara. Welcome, Tara. Welcome, Chelsea. Thank you. Welcome, Erin. Awesome. We'll give it about another minute and then we'll jump right in. Hola, mami. For those of you that might not know, my mom is in this session. Awesome. Another couple folks introducing themselves. Welcome, Lisa. Welcome, Yiping. Yay! All right, about another minute, and I also wanted to let you all know that I am getting more adept at monitoring the chat while I'm presenting, but if I by any chance miss something, I apologize in advance and we will definitely come back to it. Feel free to ask any questions that you might have, any comments, anything that you might want to be talking about. Feel free to pop it in the chat and I will check it when I can. Amazing. All right, I think we're going to get started. So, thank you so much again to all of you for being here. We're going to be talking about gender euphoria. Um, Before we begin, I wanted to just introduce myself. My name is Arrow Hill. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns, and I am currently working at Dartmouth College as a program coordinator supporting LGBTQI plus student advising. So essentially, I handle our queer history celebration in the fall and our pride celebration in the spring. So I do a lot of talking about gender euphoria and all things LGBTQIA plus centered, and specifically in relation to student support. Amazing. And again, I'm so excited to be here with you all. So we are going to jump into it. So for the purposes of this presentation, I just wanted to make sure that we are aligning all of our terms so that we know what we're talking about. So you may have heard some different definitions of all of these different terms, but for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to be talking about gender as a relational social identity and construct, an infinite amount of social categories that help us to understand and relate to each other. For Euphoria, you may have heard it in the context of the HBO show. You may have also heard it in other contexts. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to be talking about a state of intense happiness and self-confidence. And then if we put those two together, gender euphoria, that's going to mean for this presentation again, joy, excitement, and or confidence in how one's gender is expressed, perceived, or otherwise felt. And then on the converse side of it, gender dysphoria, you may have heard it talked about in several different contexts, but for the purposes of this presentation, discomfort, pain, and or insecurity in how one's gender is expressed, perceived, or otherwise felt. So those two are kind of foils of each other. Amazing. All right, so why are we talking about this? Why is this an important topic, particularly at an online equity conference that's centering higher education, different conversations? I know a lot of folks are talking about AI. We're not really going to be talking about that at this current moment. We're going to be talking more about relationships, and human expression, I guess is a good way to put it. So, why are we talking about this in this context? The reason why I wanted to present in this context on gender euphoria is because gender euphoria is connected to trans and non-binary individuals' mental health and is associated with feelings of confidence, increased coping, and enhanced quality of life. This is backed up by a number of different studies. If you look up gender euphoria, you can look and see all of the research that backs up how protective it is for the trans and non-binary community. It's really important, especially where we are in the current socio-political context with all of the legislative attacks that are happening on the trans community in particular. It's really important to center moments of joy, moments of healing, moments of growth, moments of curiosity and exploration. So that's why we're talking about it today. And I also wanted to point out, we often hear about gender euphoria in the context of like the trans community and not really for other people. Gender pleasure is for everyone. Even if you identify as cisgender, you can still access gender euphoria. And it's important to note that it's especially important for trans people because it acts as a buffer to psychological harm. So that's a little bit of a difference when we're talking about cis folks versus trans folks accessing gender euphoria. And I also wanted to point out, because it's so multifaceted and there are so many ways to access it that we will talk about in a minute, feelings of gender euphoria can be leveraged in a lot of different ways to bolster the resilience and mental well-being of our community. In the world that we are currently living in, it is literally life-saving. This is a quote pulled from a study, a qualitative study. And it's what keeps trans folks alive, those moments of feeling fully and euphorically ourselves. So it's an avenue to feel more comfortable, confident, and joyful being who someone is. Amazing. All right, so this is a lot. I recognize I was going through my presentation with a colleague earlier this morning. This slide has a lot of information on it. I wanted it to be striking so that you all can kind of like see visually. There's so many ways to inspire gender euphoria in all of us. And these are just some of the things that I have learned as a person in the world, and also talking to colleagues, talking to students, all of this anecdotal research and observations for different avenues to accessing gender euphoria. So, one of them is through body modifications and cosmetics. So, things like makeup, removing or growing out body hair, posture, enhancing or minimizing features through clothing and makeup, binding, packing, tucking, tattoos, piercings, dyeing or cutting your hair, so many different ways of body modifications and different things that have different access barriers. Another one is affirming medical care. You may have heard about this one in relation to the trans community, in relation to some legislation that is trying to block these things. That is why I put it second, because even though there are increased amounts of barriers in the way of people accessing these different I guess avenues is a good way to put it. Even though there are barriers, there are still other things that we can do to, one, for ourselves, access these different things, and also to support folks in accessing them. So, affirming medical care is another big one that is talked about more widely. Experimenting with scents is another one that I don't hear talked about very much. So, buying some cologne, buying perfume, different body care products. We know that those are wildly gendered. So for example, going to a different aisle in like a CVS or something might be the way to access some gender euphoria for you. Exploring fashion and finding your style. I think a lot of folks maybe when we're exploring our identities, typically for cis folks it happens a little bit earlier. It happens around puberty. For trans folks it might happen a little bit later in life. So exploring fashion and finding your style might look a little bit different. Like maybe you have the autonomy to go to a store when you're an adult versus when you're a teenager. Maybe you have your own money and you're able to kind of like spend it where you want to and find your style in different ways. Um, I've also heard that taking action for trans rights can be incredibly gender euphoric for some folks. It just helps people feel more confident and right in themselves to take that outward action. Talking with loved ones is another big one. Being called by the correct name and pronouns, gendered and non-gendered compliments and greetings. So instead of maybe saying, hey guys, or hi girls, saying, hey y'all, hi everyone, welcome friends, things like that. Um, or if you prefer to have a gendered compliment or a gendered greeting, you can say that. But yeah. Another one is participating in various activities, traditionally gendered or otherwise. I've heard a lot of folks say that cooking is particularly gender euphoric on all genders. It can just be a way of either participating in something um, socially supported, I guess, or kind of like bending those gender barriers. Physical activity in the gym is another one that I've heard really great things about. Another one is watching a comfort show or reading a familiar book. This one blurs the lines a little bit between what is like gender euphoria versus euphoria or just general joy. I had, when I did this presentation in the past, someone asked me, so like, what is the actual difference between joy and gender joy? And I think that it varies based on the person and based on the context. So there isn't really clear-cut categories. It's really whatever makes you feel good in what you are experiencing your gender as. And I think that we could all use a lot more joy generally. So it may be helpful to have those clear-cut categories for you. I'm sorry I can't give that to you, but in ways that we can find joy, I think it's just important to make sure that we are finding all of that joy and not trying to limit ourselves to categories. I hope that makes sense. Um, and also seeing others who are confident in their gender presentation or expression. So if you see someone walking on the street who is working the heck out of some boots and you're like, wow, I really enjoy that. I want to try that for myself, or I'm good to just watch them work all of that. And it gives you a sense of like connection or confidence to be yourself. That's gender joy too. Um, and there's so much more. I could talk about this for literally hours. Um, but yeah, those are some of the anecdotal research and observations that I have had from just like interacting with students, interacting with colleagues, interacting with loved ones, all of the above. So just some ideas on how to inspire gender joy in yourself and or others. I also wanted to point out these little bubbles over here. So this is a little bit more silly on the silly side. So if you have ever heard the phrase blank is so gender, I have heard it used in terms of like colors or music, like a song that someone feels particularly connected to, that inspires gender euphoria for them. They would say, blank song is so gender, or the color pink that is on my nails is so gender, like something like that. I just want to highlight that we can play around with it. It doesn't have to be in such serious categories. Gender is often play and it's often fun. So it's really important to just highlight how interesting and how explorative it can be. Another one is my gender is. So I have heard folks talk about their gender as like, my gender is a waterfall. My gender is the scent of cedar, things like that. So just like playing around with what these different categories and these different social buckets can mean. Um, but yeah, I've also heard folks talk about um, my gender is when a dog chooses not to bark at me and chooses to snuggle instead. Like those types of things can be really affirming and euphoric for some different people. So just some other examples of like different things that you can use to access gender euphoria. Amazing. So, yeah, like I mentioned, it can be silly or serious. It can be specific or broad. It can be as simple as painting your nails, as simple as getting a haircut. It can also be as intense as undergoing surgery, undergoing hormone treatment. Um, yeah, there are a lot of different um, binaries, but we can play around with that because I hate a binary. So it's really definitely a both and situation. So it can be presentation and expression, actions and thoughts, internal and external. So there are a ton of different ways to explore all of these different things. I am now going to take a pause and direct your attention to the chat. And I would love if y'all are able to say one thing or a couple of things that inspire gender joy for you. You can also be for a colleague or just like a hypothetical, like, hey, I've been thinking about this and maybe it would feel really fun, really interesting to explore a little bit more. Whatever you would like to do, I am super open and I love answering questions. Um, so if you're like, does this count as gender euphoria? I'm probably gonna say yes. But it might be just a really cool and fun way to learn a little bit about others and how others are accessing gender joy, or just to like do some introspection. I know it's probably a little bit earlier in the morning for our friends on the West Coast and in some different places, so this might be a little bit interesting of a reflection to start the day off with. Or if you're closing your day, that's cool too. Awesome. I see some more stuff cropping up in the chat. Amazing. Wear skirts and curl my hair. A spa day. An undercut freshly shaved. Yes. Yes. I actually am in dire need of a haircut. I don't know if y'all can tell. Uh, Amazing. Playing video games and being good at them. Fabulous. Yes. Flowy. Oh, I love that. I love the combination of a flowy blouse with men's slacks. That's amazing. I love, yeah, there's just so much play to be had. It's, yeah, amazing. Awesome, friends. This is amazing. I'll continue with this activity for like another minute and then we can move on. Awesome. Dancing. Oh, I just saw Chelsea's dancing. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Accessorizing differently. Amazing. Yes. The fluidity of it. I love the way you put that, Abigail. That's amazing. Gorgeous. Awesome. I am now going to close the chat, but I will go back to it. Thank you so much for humoring me with some different ways of accessing gender joy. I'm going to minimize this again so I can see. Awesome. And we will keep coming back to that. You are welcome to pop any questions that are coming up in the chat. I am happy to just ramble and talk about this stuff. Fabulous. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the title of this presentation, which is Gender Euphoria in Terrifying Times. I have previously presented on supporting queer and trans learners in restrictive legislative context, so I'm also happy to talk about that. I really wanted to make sure to center joy and euphoria in this presentation, so I only have a little section talking about it. But again, I'm happy to talk about it more if that's where the interest lies. So, to reiterate, we are in fact operating in truly terrifying times with an exponential attack on trans identities in general in the trans community. There have been a truly staggering number of anti-LGBTQIA plus bills. Social and physical attacks against the trans community have skyrocketed in the past couple of years. And I also wanted to point out only about 0.6 to 0.3% of the world's population identifies under the transgender umbrella. So we are talking about a very small population of people who are being disproportionately attacked in the media, in legislation, socially, in different contexts. So it's a truly very small population of folks who inhabit this planet that we call Earth. The ACLU is currently tracking 526 anti-LGBTQIA plus bills. That accounts for the entire LGBTQIA plus community, but it's disproportionately impacting trans folks. So there is a very clear targeted attack happening on trans people. By taking action in and outside of formal learning spaces, you have the power to support and protect your trans students, your trans colleagues, friends, and loved ones, in addition to all of your cis students, all of the cis people in your life, because there are so many different ways and avenues to access gender joy. Just sharing the idea of gender euphoria and all of these different things that we can do to play and explore and be curious about all of these things, that can support everyone collectively. It doesn't have to just be for your trans students. Um, Amazing, and I hope that makes sense. I'm going to go to this one. So, how can we support others in accessing gender joy? These are just some like very initial ideas, and they are very broad intentionally to allow for a lot of flexibility for different needs. So, providing tangible material and financial resources when we're able to, mobilizing cis allies. A lot of the time when we're talking about mutual aid, it's trans folks supporting trans folks. And trans folks are historically very disenfranchised and have a lot of other things on their plates. So when we are able to mobilize cis allies, it's really important and really impactful. Another one is just being in community with one another and listening to understand or just respect. I think we talk a lot about active listening in moments of higher education. And I think that it's really important to try to understand. And also, there are always going to be times when we actually can't understand where someone is coming from or what their experience is like. And we still respect them. We still have to treat them with kindness and love and respect. It's really important to, even when you don't understand something, like even when someone is like, yeah, I really love wearing lipstick and I really love wearing skirts on the weekends, you don't have to understand that. You don't have to understand that fully in order to respect them and treat them with kindness and maybe a little bit of curiosity, respectfully honoring the lived experience and truth of those around us. So that kind of ties into the previous point of respecting and honoring the different perspectives, experiences, and all of the above that people are coming into different learning spaces with. Everyone exists outside of the bubble of a classroom or a discussion post or any type of thing that we are interacting with each other in. Everyone exists outside of that. You're only seeing a glimpse of people when you are only talking to them for a minute or even asynchronously. So just being sure to honor the lived experience and truth of those around us at all times as best we can. Above all, it's really important to be curious and continue exploring for ourselves and for others. Um, Asking questions is not something to be ashamed of. Not understanding is also not something to be ashamed of, as long as we're approaching it with the intention of respecting other people. I think that should make sense. Amazing. And then my last point is borrowed from a local trans community leader in my area. They're from Hanover, New Hampshire. This quote really was impactful for me because things have been getting pretty dang bad and very scary. And it's hard to be a person. It's very hard to be a trans person right now. So the quote that they said in a little community-led space where we were talking about activism and supporting each other, they said, "We can keep making soup for each other no matter what." And I thought that that was really impactful because essentially it's trying to get at like, no matter how bad things get, we can still be there for each other. We can still do something as simple as making dinner for each other. And that really warmed my heart. So I hope that it warmed all of your hearts too. Yeah, I appreciate you so incredibly much. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn to continue these conversations. I'm also happy to drop my email in the chat. And I also have a resource goodie bag for supporting LGBTQIA plus students, particularly in restrictive contexts, but all across the board. So different techniques, different word clouds that I've done from different presentations, also different slide decks that have some really cool information in them. So you should be able to access that via the QR code. And I am so grateful to you all. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions and to just like kind of like talk to you and get to know all of you. So I am going to stop sharing in approximately like 10 more seconds just to make sure that you're able to scan the QR codes. But thank you so incredibly much for listening, friends, and feel free to continue these conversations either in the chat. I know that a lot of folks are doing other things at the same time as this conference, but I would love if we can just have a little bit of a conversation about either gender joy, gender euphoria, or just supporting LGBTQI plus students in general. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing now. Amazing. Thanks, y'all. I also know that you have a lot of stuff to do. And I talked about a lot of stuff. So feel free to hop off the call, do what you need to do. But thank you so much for being here.
So you have time for Q&A, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Um, you got a question in the chat.
Awesome. Can you talk a little more about how we can support LGBTQ plus learners in online environments? Absolutely. So, one of the main things that I have found to be very helpful, particularly in online environments, is humanizing yourself. I think that that is something that we talk a lot about in online education, just to make it feel more human. I know also in the morning welcome and announcements, they were talking about making learning feel more human in an age of AI. Um, so I think being upfront about like, hey, I understand that you are a whole person and you can come to me with any needs that you have, any like access needs, any basic needs, and just being upfront about understanding where people are coming from, particularly in the context of like a lot of people are fleeing from their home state or their home country. They're in a state of uncertainty. They don't know where they're going to be next week. So just being flexible, being understanding, um, those kind of like basic core ideas of supporting students. And then to be a little bit more specific, I found that it's helpful to introduce yourself with your pronouns. If you are in an online Zoom environment, I know I don't have my pronouns here, but I can change that right now. If you are comfortable with sharing your pronouns in your Zoom name, you are encouraged to do that. It's also, oh, I love French tip nails too. That's amazing. I love this. Thank you for sharing. Um, if you're comfortable sharing your own pronouns when you are getting to know your students right at the beginning, that can be really, really helpful. If you are not, that's also completely valid and okay. But just making sure that folks know that you are a safer person to talk to about what they might need, what they might be going through, different things like that. Uh, but yeah, I also think that one of the strategies that I have included in my other presentation that centers supporting LGBTQI plus learners in restrictive contexts, it's really helpful to provide a lot of flexibility within your curriculum. So if you're able to incorporate choice into what folks are studying and what folks are bringing into the room, that can be really helpful so that you will not get in trouble for someone bringing those topics into the classroom. So that is both protecting you and protecting the students. They should be free to bring in whatever they want. Um, as an instructor, it can be a little bit trickier depending on your geographical context and sociopolitical context. If you are telling them, hey, you're going to read this LGBTQI plus centered book, that might get flagged. But if someone is like, oh, I really want to do this research project on this LGBTQI plus centered topic, that looks a little bit different. So I hope that makes sense. So incorporating choice, understanding that people are whole people, things like that. So, any other questions, friends? And again, feel free to contact me afterwards. I'm happy to continue this conversation online. Thank you. Awesome. Interested in an update on the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. So, um, we are still being inundated with anti-LGBTQI plus legislation. I will drop a helpful link into the chat. It's from the ACLU um, in 2026. So let me make sure it goes to everyone. There we go. So that link will take you to the ACLU's landing page for mapping attacks on LGBTQ rights. Excuse me. And it breaks it down by state. So it's very helpful. I can actually share my screen probably, um, and just walk you all through it a little bit. Awesome. So this is what it looks like. And oh, It jumped from this morning. So now it's at 528. I did in fact update my slides this morning and that just jumped, so that's great. Fabulous. So the map is split up by state, and you can see the darker a state is, the more bills they have. So the darkest is going to be 16 plus anti-LGBTQIA plus bills. A lot of these, you can see it's also broken up by issue. A lot of them are focused on curriculum censorship. A lot of them are also talking about K through 12 issues. So it's not necessarily explicitly related to higher education, but education in general and what students are coming into their experiences of higher education with. All of that, it doesn't just get left at the door. These kids are experiencing these things throughout their K through 12 schooling, and then they come into higher education with all of that. So. Yeah. But you are welcome to scroll through here. It's interesting and a little bit disheartening. So I would recommend taking it on in moderation because there are over 500 bills to look through here. Um, but yeah, absolutely. Yay. Okay. Any other questions, friends? All right. Again, please feel free to stay in touch. I am so excited to be talking about something a little bit lighter this time, but also centering some of the conversations around all of the hard stuff. So, yay, thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate you, and I will see you later. Have a great rest of your day, friends.
Thank you so much, Arrow, for being here and sharing your time and expertise with us. Thanks to everyone who attended. Our next session is starting at 10, so we've got a little bit of time. And yeah, feel free to come back for the next presenter. Thank you
Awesome.
again.
Thanks, friends. Bye bye.